Welcome to Sleepy Science, a quiet place where big questions drift as gently as clouds across the sky. Tonight's journey takes us into one of the most mysterious ideas of all. Could Earth have hosted another civilization long before us? It's called the Silurian hypothesis, and it asks whether signs of intelligence might be hidden deep in the planet's ancient record. Before we begin, I would love to know where you are listening from. It is always humbling to imagine these gentle explorations being heard across so many landscapes, all held by the same Earth. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. And to those already here, thank you. You are helping this circle of listeners grow, one curious thought at a time. I hope this story soothes you toward rest. Though, fair warning, the question of forgotten civilizations may be too intriguing to sleep through. If you do find yourself listening until the end, at least you will have learned something fascinating about how science searches for memory in stone. So let us begin with a quiet question to carry. If another civilization once walked this planet, how would we know, and would we even recognize their traces today? Pick up a stone, any stone, from a field, a riverbank, or even the edge of a city street. At first glance, it seems ordinary, a lump of weight, unremarkable, without voice. Yet, in truth, it is older than any building, older than the language you use to describe it, older even than the mountains on the horizon. Rocks are Earth's diaries, written not in ink, but in layers, in minerals, in scars left by fire and water. They hold secrets, and though they seem silent, they speak in time measured far beyond human lives. Beneath their hardness lies memory. Granite remembers the slow cooling of molten depths. Sandstone carries the touch of ancient rivers. Every grain once a fragment of mountain worn down by patience. Shale, dark and fragile, tells of oceans that vanished long before human eyes. To hold a stone is to hold not just matter, but a story. It has traveled, shifted, transformed, lived 1,000 lives before resting in your hand. Consider how long that Earth has existed, more than 4.5 billion years. Human history, even stretching across empires and civilizations, is barely a breath against that span. Yet the stones beneath your feet have been here through almost all of it, watching continents drift, seas rise and vanish, creatures appear and disappear. Dinosaurs once pressed their feet into soft mud that hardened into stone. Rain fell on volcanic ash, preserving the prints of early humans. Even the silence of mountains is not truly silence, but a slow, patient story told in crumbling peaks and eroding valleys. Some rocks hold fossils, tiny whispers of life pressed into permanence. A fern leaf etched in shale, a seashell imprinted in limestone, the curve of a trilobite sealed away in stone for hundreds of millions of years. These are secrets, once alive, now locked in mineral form. They remind you that stone does not only hold Earth's memory, but the memory of life itself. To find a fossil is to open a page of a book written in silence and patience. Even crystals carry stories. Quartz, with its clear facets, is born of cooling magma and mineral-rich water. Diamonds form under pressure so intense it seems impossible. Forged miles beneath Earth's surface and lifted upward only through violent eruptions. Each glimmer and fracture is a word in the language of the earth. one that geologists spend lifetimes learning to read. Stones seem simple, yet their patterns, shapes, and placements are codes of time. And then there is the silence of the oldest stones of all. In places like Canada, Greenland, and Australia, geologists have found rocks more than 4 billion years old, fragments of Earth's earliest crust, surviving the planet's endless recycling. These ancient stones carry secrets of a world that no longer exists. When oceans were first forming and the atmosphere was still raw and young, to touch them is to touch a remnant of the beginning, a piece of memory stretching almost to the dawn of time. But not all secrets are about age. Some are about movement. Stones travel. A boulder in a quiet meadow may have been carried by a glacier from hundreds of miles away. A pebble in a stream may have once been part of a cliff face, broken loose by frost, rolled and smoothed by water. Desert sands were once mountain peaks. Nothing in stone is truly still. Everything moves, slowly, invisibly, with the turning of the earth. The patience of stone is its greatest secret. It does not resist change, nor does it chase it. It accepts the pressure of mountains, the pull of rivers, the touch of wind, the heat of fire, and transforms quietly again and again. Soft clay turns to shale. Shale becomes slate. Slate transforms into schist, and schist into gleaming gneiss. Each change is a sentence in a story billions of years long. Even human hands, carving and shaping stone, become part of this story. Pyramids rise, cathedrals are built, cities are paved, and still, stone remains long after empires fall. The secrets it holds are not just natural but human. Names etched into walls, tools chipped from flint, statues weathered by centuries of rain. Our own lives, short as they are, become another layer written into the surface of stone. You imagine yourself lying against a mountain slope, palm pressed to the cold rock. Beneath you lies not just weight, but memory oceans that have vanished. Creatures long extinct, firestorms that once shook the earth. The mountain does not speak in words, yet it whispers in patience. Its secret is not hidden from you, but stretched across so vast a scale that only by slowing your thoughts can you hear it. To live among stones is to live surrounded by memory. Every step you take, every wall you pass, every pebble you skip across water carries a history deeper than you can imagine. Earth remembers more than it tells, yet it leaves its secrets everywhere in layers, in crystals, in fossils. In silence, you rest in this thought that the world beneath you, hard and steady, is not empty but full. That even the smallest stone is a book written in the slow hand of time. And though its language is patient, if you listen closely, you can hear the stories. It keeps the secrets of Earth, waiting quietly beneath your feet. A century feels long, a millennium almost ungraspable. And yet, when you place these measures beside Earth's age 4.5 billion years, they shrink into whispers, vanishing into the silence of what is truly deep time. Human history is not even a full page in this book, not even a paragraph, but a single thin line scratched near the edge of the final chapter. Imagine, for a moment, that Earth's entire history were condensed into a single calendar year. January 1st would mark the planet's birth, the moment molten rock cooled and seas began to form. March would see the first stirrings of primitive life, tiny cells dividing in oceans. By late summer, plants would reach toward light, and creatures would begin to crawl. Dinosaurs would not appear until December, filling the world with their heavy footsteps. Humanity, we would arrive only in the last minutes of December 31st. Our entire recorded history, every empire, invention, and song contained in a breath before midnight. This is the scale of deep time. Vast stretches so immense that human language buckles beneath them. What is an hour when compared to 1,000,000 years? What is a lifetime beside the slow lifting of mountains, the carving of canyons, the drifting of continents? You feel your own years, brief and delicate, as sparks against the backdrop of eon. And yet, there is a comfort in this perspective. To see time stretched wide is to see your troubles softened, to realize they are smaller than a single grain of sand on an endless shore. Rocks are the calendars of this deep time, their layers recording seasons, centuries, and ages. Each stratum of sandstone or shale is a page, pressed with the memory of oceans or deserts long gone. Fossils embedded within them are bookmarks, fragile reminders of creatures that lived and died millions of years before the first human gaze. To walk among cliffs is to walk through libraries that rise into the sky, shelves written in stone. Geologists measure these stretches with patience. The Cambrian, when life bloomed in strange shapes. The Devonian, when fish first took to land. The Jurassic, when dinosaurs thundered across forests. The Cretaceous, when their reign ended in sudden silence. Each era spans millions of years, periods so immense that human civilization, with all its triumphs and failures, is little more than a flicker in the night. You imagine a clock stretched across the ocean, its hands sweeping not minutes but millions of years. The rise of mountains, the splitting of continents, the opening and closing of seas, all of it ticks slowly but steadily. In this rhythm, the earth has patience beyond comprehension. Whole civilizations rise and fall between two ticks of its second hand. And yet, deep time is not only about distance. It is also about connection. The calcium in your bones was forged in ancient seas. The iron in your blood, born from dying stars billions of years ago. The timeline of the universe is not separate from you, it passes through you. You are a fragment of its story, carrying minerals that have traveled across eons. In this sense, your body is both impossibly young and unimaginably old. Consider how landscapes themselves bear the mark of deep time. The Grand Canyon is not just a wonder of erosion, but a cross-section of nearly 2 billion years exposed in bands of color. The Himalayas, still rising, are the result of continents colliding 50 million years ago, a process still unfolding beneath our feet. Even the soil beneath a tree is not merely dirt, it is the powder of ancient mountains ground down by ice. Wind and rain across hundreds of thousands of years. It can be difficult to feel these scales in daily life, when human clocks mark only hours and years. But sometimes deep time brushes close. A fossil shell in your hand, spiraled and perfect, may have once rested in a shallow sea 500 million years ago. A pebble at the beach may have been carried, grain by grain, from a mountain that stood before humanity began. Even your breath carries oxygen, once released by ancient forests, carbon exhaled by long-extinct creatures. To think in deep time is to surrender the illusion of permanence. Civilizations are brief, Languages vanish. Even continents drift and rearrange. Yet within this impermanence is a kind of peace. The earth has endured countless ages, and still it spins. Your place in it, though small, is real, woven into a story that began long before you and will continue long after, perhaps. This is why deep time feels both humbling and comforting. Humbling because it reminds you that your life is not the center of the story, but a momentary glow in an immense unfolding. Comforting because it reminds you that even your smallest joys and struggles are part of something greater, threads woven into a fabric too vast to unravel. You close your eyes and picture calendars stretched across oceans, each wave a century, each tide 1,000 years. Human history marks only a faint line near the edge, almost invisible, yet undeniably present. You rest in this thought that to exist at all, even for a moment, is to stand within the vastness of deep time, carried gently in its endless, patient flow. Scientists once asked a question, both playful and profound. If an advanced civilization had lived on Earth millions of years ago, would we be able to tell? Would any trace remain, or would time have swept it all away, dissolving steel into dust, cities into sand, and language into silence? The thought is known as the Silurian hypothesis, a thought experiment that invites us to imagine worlds before our own, hidden beneath the deep folds of time. At first, it feels impossible to imagine. How could something as vast as a civilization vanish so completely? Yet, when you step back and listen to the scale of Earth's history, you begin to see human civilization has existed for only a few thousand years, and in that blink, we have already transformed landscapes, burned fuel, left plastic, and carved our marks into stone. But what will survive 10 million years from now? What will survive 100 million? Time is not kind to the fragile fingerprints of culture. Buildings crumble, metals corrode, roads fracture and dissolve. Even entire cities are swallowed by forests, deserts, or seas in mere centuries. The traces of Rome, Babylon, or ancient Egypt, mighty civilizations in human memory, have already grown faint, their ruins reduced to fragments. And these are but thousands of years old. Extend the thought to millions, and even the greatest monuments of today would vanish into the Earth's turning cycles. Thought the Silurian hypothesis suggests that if another civilization had arisen tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, perhaps before mammals came to dominate, perhaps even before the last great age of dinosaurs, its remains might be buried beyond recognition. Fossils are rare. The Earth recycles itself through tectonic drift, volcanoes, erosion, and the grinding of glaciers. Entire continents have been reshaped, oceans opened and closed. In deep time, permanence is illusion. So, scientists ask, what traces could survive? Not statues or machines, but subtler signatures, chemical whispers in the rocks. Layers of carbon or unusual isotopes, marking a moment when something extraordinary occurred. Human activity, for instance, leaves behind plastics, altered minerals, radioactive signatures, and sudden shifts in carbon levels. If someone, millions of years from now, studied the sediments of our time, they might notice these scars, a brief geologic oddity, a sharp line in Earth's diary. And if such markers might one day reveal us, perhaps they could reveal others too. This thought does not claim evidence of lost civilizations. Instead, it opens the imagination. Could the Earth's past contain forgotten chapters, written not in bones but in chemistry? Perhaps the question itself is more valuable than the answer. To ask it is to stretch beyond human pride, to see ourselves not as inevitable, but as one possibility among many. You picture walking across ancient cliffs, the layers rising like a library of time. Somewhere in that stone may be secrets we cannot yet decipher. Spikes of carbon, strange anomalies, signals blurred by age. What if one of those anomalies was once a city, a fire, a culture that lived and vanished before we were even a dream? To drift with this thought is not to seek aliens beneath the ground, but to recognize how fleeting we are. Civilizations may not leave echoes that last across deep time. If we are not careful, even ours could fade into a single layer, a chemical whisper lost in the great stack of ages. And yet, there is something comforting here too. Even if we vanish, the Earth continues. Time carries on, reshaping, renewing, folding memory into stone. Whether or not others came before us, we are now part of that same process, woven into the fabric of the planet. The Silurian hypothesis becomes less about proof and more about perspective. It reminds you that deep time erases sharp boundaries, softening even the proudest achievements into dust. But it also reminds you that we belong to this story, however brief our chapter. You breathe slowly, letting the thought settle that the Earth may hold secrets beyond imagining, that history may be broader than we know, and that to live is to add one more layer to a book still being written. Somewhere in the stone, your age too will rest, perhaps just a thin line, but a real one. And as you drift deeper into this thought, you find yourself gazing not backward, but forward toward the question of what traces we will leave, and how the far future might read our presence in the silent language of stone. Stone has a memory, but it is a selective one. It holds on to certain whispers of the past while letting others fade away, as if choosing which stories to tell and which to keep in silence. Fossils, those preserved shells, bones, and imprints of ancient plants are some of the clearest records we have of lives that came before. Yet even they are incomplete, fragile bookmarks in the vast library of time. Entire ages may pass without leaving a single fossil behind. To imagine this is to feel the unevenness of memory itself. A dinosaur's towering skeleton might be preserved in rock, yet the countless small creatures that lived beside it may be lost forever. A leaf may leave its delicate veins etched in stone, while entire forests disappear without a trace. The fossil record is not a perfect archive, but a patchwork quilt, with holes wide enough to hide entire worlds. For a fossil to form, chance must conspire with circumstance. A creature must die in the right place, near mud, sand, or water that can cover it quickly. It must be buried before scavengers or decay consume it. Minerals must seep in, replacing fragile tissues with stone. And then, over millions of years, the rock holding this memory must rise where humans can find it, not crumble or sink into the deep crust of the earth. The odds are long, and the survival of each fossil feels less like certainty and more like miracle when you walk through a museum. Gazing at the bones of creatures from long ago, you are not seeing a complete picture. You are seeing a fraction of a fraction, the lucky survivors of chance. For every fossil on display, countless others never formed or destroyed, or still lie buried in places we may never uncover. The silence between fossils is as important as the fossils themselves. This silence matters when we try to imagine deep time. If an entire civilization had once lived on Earth millions of years ago, how much would survive? Fossils are rare, even for bones and shells, things far sturdier than the fragile remnants of buildings or tools. Most of what humans make, wood, fabric, plastic, even metal would, crumble within thousands, let alone millions, of years. Stone remembers unevenly, and civilizations might fall into those gaps. Even the creatures we do know through fossils are often incomplete. A single bone may represent a species. A few teeth may carry the entire memory of an animal's existence. Much of what we imagine about dinosaurs, or about early mammals, or about life in ancient seas is based on fragments stitched together with educated guesses. Time erases details, leaving outlines for us to fill with imagination. You rest in the realization that the fossil record is both a gift and a mystery. It gives us windows into lives otherwise lost, but it does not give us all the windows. Instead, it offers glimpses, snapshots, separated by long stretches of darkness. For every moment preserved, there are countless others that vanish into silence. Scientists call this the problem of incompleteness, and it shapes everything we know about the past. Fossils tell us when certain life forms existed, but they may not tell us when they began or when they disappeared. The first member of a species may have lived long before the first fossil was made, and the last member may have walked the earth long after the last fossil was buried. What we hold in stone is not the full story, but a timeline sketched in broken lines. This limitation opens doors for wonder as much as for science. The gaps leave space for questions, for imagination, for humility. What forms of life came and went without leaving a trace? What ecosystems thrived, flourished, and disappeared in silence? What entire histories may have played out unseen, remembered only in molecules that shifted and stones that changed? The Silurian hypothesis, with its question of forgotten civilizations, grows sharper here. If the fossil record is incomplete even for bones, what hope is there for the fragile traces of tools, roads, or cities? Perhaps the earth has carried stories we will never know, erased not by conspiracy, but by time itself. Fossils preserve, but they also remind us of what cannot be preserved. And yet, within their limits, fossils are profound. They are not full chapters, but they are words enough to remind us that life is ancient, diverse, and resilient. They show us that even when memory is uneven, some echoes remain. A shell pressed into stone, a fern's outline, a footprint frozen in mud. These fragments are like whispers drifting through the ages, fragile yet powerful. You picture holding a fossil in your hand. It feels solid, eternal, but what it represents is fragile, a moment caught by chance, a life remembered when countless others were lost. The stone tells you, quietly, that memory is never perfect. The past is both known and unknowable, stitched together from gifts of survival and gaps of silence. And so you rest in this truth. Fossils are not perfect storytellers, but they are enough to remind us of the vastness of what has been. They teach us that stone remembers, but remembers unevenly, that memory itself is selective, fragile, and shaped by chance. And in that unevenness, mystery remains, inviting you to wonder about all the stories that lie forever untold. Stone endures, but even stone is not forever. Steel gleams, glass shines, concrete towers rise with confidence, yet time has patience greater than all of them. To imagine the future of a city is to imagine fragility. In decades, rust blooms on bridges, ivy creeps over walls. In centuries, roofs collapse, streets crack, and roots pry through the seams. In thousands of years, towers that once seemed eternal bow to wind, rain, frost, and silence. And in millions, even their shadows are erased. You picture the skyline of a great city, skyscrapers piercing clouds, roads threading like veins, glass windows glowing with the lives inside. Now imagine the lights winking out, one by one. The windows darken, the machines still, the walls begin their quiet surrender. Concrete crumbles, grain by grain, returning to sand. Steel bends, rust flakes away, bridges sag into rivers. What was once proud becomes brittle, broken, and buried. Nature does not rush, yet it does not stop. Rain seeps into cracks, freezing and thawing, widening fractures year after year. Wind carries grit that sands away at edges. Moss and lichen creep across stone, followed by shrubs and trees whose roots split what was thought unshakable. Within centuries, forests reclaim avenues, rivers shift and drown districts. Animals wander through places that once held only machines. In the ruins, silence takes the place of engines. The tallest skyscraper becomes a hollow shell, its frame corroding, its glass long shattered. Birds nest in its beams, vines lace through its stairwells. Eventually it collapses, floor upon floor, until only a mound of rubble remains. And even rubble does not last. Groundwater, leaches, minerals, sediment covers the rest. Within geologic time, cities are not monuments, but dust, pressed into layers indistinguishable from any other stone. This is the fragility of ruins, not that they fall quickly, but that they fall surely. Time erases with infinite patience what humans call durable steel, glass, concrete tar, but temporary masks worn against the slow sculpting of the earth. They are strong in the moment, weak across millennia. Archaeologists remind us of this truth when they study ancient cities. Temples that once dominated landscapes are reduced to broken columns. Roads are covered by forests. Walls dissolve into hills. Even the greatest wonders of antiquity survive only in fragments, and those are but thousands of years old. What, then, will remain of modern skylines after a million? Perhaps nothing recognizably strange mineral traces in layers of rock, echoes of alloys and concrete blended into the Earth's sedimentary memory. You imagine walking through such a far future. No buildings rise. No streets remain. Perhaps a faint discoloration in stone, or a seam of unusual minerals, hints at what once stood. To future eyes, these traces may not even speak of a city only, of something unusual, a chemical shadow of forgotten industry. And yet, this fragility is not despair. It is reminder. Nothing is fixed forever, not even the tallest skyscraper. The same truth that erases cities also carved valleys, grew forests, built mountains, and scattered seeds. Change is the nature of the earth. To dissolve is not failure. It is part of the cycle. The dust of ruins may one day nourish a meadow, and the memory of glass may become part of quartz in a future stone. You rest in the thought that silence is not emptiness. When the last fragment of a city fades, the earth continues. Winds still move, rivers still run, seeds still sprout. Fragility does not end the story. It simply returns it to a quieter page. And so, even as you picture your tallest skyscraper crumbling into dust, you find calm in the truth. Nothing lasts forever, but nothing is truly lost either. The silence that follows is not barren, but full of space for new beginnings. The earth does not keep diaries in ink. Its memories are pressed into stone, written in elements, minerals, and patterns that span millions of years. Geologists read these signals with patience, knowing that the planet speaks in layers. A shift in carbon here, an unusual metal there. A sudden rise or fall in temperature etched into ancient sediments. Each is like a faint fingerprint, a signal that something once happened, even if the details are long gone. You imagine a cliff face, its layers rising like stacked pages of a book. To most eyes, it is only rock, but to those who study it, every stripe carries a whisper of history. A darker band might mean a time when volcanoes raged, filling the air with ash. A pale layer could be the remains of an ancient seabed, pressed shells and corals into chalk. Within these pages, geologists look for more than nature. They look for anomalies, signals that might speak of something different, perhaps even of industry. One such signal lies in carbon isotopes. Carbon comes in several forms, some stable, others less so. When life burns, when forests are cut, when fossil fuels are consumed, the balance of these isotopes shifts. Today, we can measure the clear mark of human activity, the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13, altered by the massive release of buried fuels. If this moment were buried beneath future layers, that shift would remain a chemical echo of our age. Geologists wonder if such signals could exist in deeper time, hinting at events that were not natural, but shaped by hands long forgotten. Other clues lie in minerals. Some elements, rare in nature, appear suddenly in industrial processes. Aluminum, for example, is abundant in Earth's crust, but almost never exists in pure form without human effort. If we were to vanish, fragments of our aluminum might endure, embedded in sediments or fused into strange stones. Likewise, plastics and synthetic chemicals, though fragile over short spans, may leave altered compounds or molecular ghosts detectable for millions of years. Even if the objects themselves crumble, their traces may remain, like faint shadows on the geologic canvas. Temperature itself is another page in the record. The Earth's climate shifts naturally, ice ages, warm periods, long stretches of relative calm. Yet, when change happens suddenly, it leaves distinctive marks. Ancient warming events can be tracked in sediments, ocean chemistry, and even the growth rings of corals. Our current age is shaping such a mark, a spike of warming, a rapid change compared to the slow rhythms of the past. To future geologists, it may look like a sudden flare, a brief fire lit across the timeline. Could there have been others? Spikes lost in the vastness, belonging to ages before ours. These signals are faint, and they are layered among countless natural causes. Volcanoes release carbon, asteroids scatter rare elements, supernova dust rains down, shifting the balance of metals in Earth's crust. To separate the natural from the artificial is to ask delicate questions, to compare patterns, to wonder what counts as coincidence and what as intent. The challenge is not just in finding a signal, but in recognizing its meaning. You picture a scientist kneeling before stone, brushing a hand across its surface. To most, it is silent, but with tools and knowledge, the rock speaks. Here, a layer marks the death of the dinosaurs, an iridium-rich seam from an asteroid impact. There, a band tells of an ocean that warmed and lost its oxygen, reshaping life itself. Elsewhere, faint isotopic shifts whisper of fires that burned forests long gone. The Earth remembers, but not always clearly, not always in the way we hope. The Silurian hypothesis rests heavily on this unevenness. If another industrial age existed millions of years ago, would its signals survive? Could geologists today recognize them as different from natural events? A thin layer of carbon, a sudden warming, an unusual mineral deposit each might be dismissed as volcanic or cosmic unless seen with new eyes. The signals could be there, faint and waiting, overlooked in the vast complexity of Earth's story. Even our own signals, so strong now, may fade. Cities will vanish, artifacts will crumble, but the isotopic ratios, the altered minerals, the strange chemical ghosts in sediments, these may linger, subtle fingerprints of a species that once was. To a future intelligence, these will be signals in the rocks. A puzzle piece of history that can never be fully assembled. You drift in the thought that the Earth itself is both the storyteller and the censor. It writes memories into stone, but only some, and never the whole. It offers signals faint, fragile, partial, and leaves the rest to silence. And so you rest with the question, what signals lie waiting, already written in the rocks beneath us, their meanings hidden, their voices too quiet for us to yet understand. The Earth has known silence greater than any human pause. Not the silence of a night without wind, nor the hush after a storm, but the deep, unsettling quiet that follows when whole branches of life vanish at once. These are the mass extinctions moments when the planet's story shatters and thousands, even millions of species disappear in spans that geologists call sudden, though sudden in this language may still mean thousands of years. The most famous of these endings came 66 million years ago, when the dinosaurs met their twilight. The evidence lies in a thin layer of iridium-rich clay, spread like a scar across the world. It marks the impact of a giant asteroid that darkened the skies, cooled the planet, and silenced the reign of creatures that had lasted for over 100 million years. In that silence, mammals, once small and hidden, began their climb into the spaces left empty. But this was not the only ending. Long before the dinosaurs, trilobites vanished. Coral forests collapsed. Entire marine ecosystems suffocated. Again and again, life flourished, then faltered, leaving only fragments of its abundance in stone. Each extinction has its clues, sudden changes in carbon, layers of volcanic ash, signs of seas gone anoxic and still. To scientists, these signals speak of catastrophe, but not always of clear cause. Sometimes the clues are sharp and obvious. Other times they are vague, blurred, as though the Earth turned a page too quickly for us to read. The Permian extinction, over 250 million years ago, was the greatest of them all. 90% of marine species perished, along with most life on land. The fossil record shows a collapse so thorough it left the Earth nearly empty of diversity. The cause is debated. Massive volcanic eruptions, climate upheaval, poisoned oceans, or combinations of all. But within the uncertainty lies a quiet wonder. What if endings can be caused not only by nature, but by something we do not yet imagine? This is where the Silurian hypothesis breathes softly. If another civilization had existed deep in time, would its rise and fall appear to us as anything more than a sudden extinction, a rapid shift in the record? If industry warmed the planet, altered oceans, or spread strange chemicals, the result might look the same as volcanic outpourings or asteroid dust. To us, it would appear as a natural catastrophe, even if its root were something more deliberate. You drift with this thought. Extinction is both an ending and a reset. It is silence, but also preparation for new voices. After each collapse, life returned, reshaped, reborn. Extinction is not the end of the story, but the close of a chapter. The mystery lies in why the pages turn so quickly at times. Why whole landscapes of living beings are swept away in an instant, measured by Earth's clock. When scientists read the fossil record, they see rhythms, periods of stability, then sudden falls. The Cambrian explosion of life, bursting with new forms, followed by long stillness. Then the great die-offs, marked by strange signals in the rocks. Carbon spikes, oxygen dips, layers of soot, sudden cooling or warming. These are fingerprints, but faint, and they do not point to a single hand. Some extinctions leave scars so sharp they feel like lightning, instant, unmistakable, devastating. Others stretch like shadows, slow declines where ecosystems unravel over thousands of years. To us, both feel abrupt, because in the scale of deep time, thousands of years are but seconds. To the Earth, extinction is sudden, but to those who lived it, it may have felt like a creeping dusk. You imagine walking through one of those fading worlds. Forests thinning, oceans growing murky, animals disappearing one by one. No single day feels like the end. Yet, when you step back, you see the collapse. For those who lived, it was not a sudden apocalypse, but a drawn-out silence, a slow undoing. Mass extinctions remind us that life is fragile, no matter how strong it seems. Dinosaurs ruled for over 100 million years, yet their reign ended in a moment compared to the Earth's age. Coral forests grew across oceans for eons, yet they too fell quiet. Endings come for all, in forms both obvious and hidden, and so you rest in the mystery. Could some of these endings carry signals we have not yet recognized? Could the sudden silences of the past be more than accidents of rock and fire? The possibility does not erase the known causes: asteroids, volcanoes, shifting seas, but it whispers that the record may hold more than we have yet learned to read. In the quiet left by extinctions, the Earth begins again. Life grows from the margins, adapts, invents. Endings, however abrupt, do not stop the story. They reshape it, opening space for what comes next. You linger in that thought that mass extinctions are both clues and mysteries, scars and beginnings. They tell us that the Earth remembers endings, even if unevenly, even if incompletely. And within their silence may rest not only the voices of nature, but perhaps, faintly, the echoes of forgotten hands. The Earth carries shadows, not of light, but of chemistry, deep in sediments, within layers of rock and mud. The burning of fuels leaves behind signatures ratios of carbon-shifted altered balances that betray the presence of fire on a planetary scale. These are not shadows you can see with your eyes, but shadows written in isotopes, faint but enduring. Today, we know this story well because we are the ones writing it. Fossil fuel, burning coal, oil gaspers, carbon into the air, changing the balance of isotopes that fall back into the Earth. Lighter and more common comes disproportionately from ancient plants, and as we burn their compressed remains, it floods the atmosphere and oceans. Carbon-13, heavier and rarer, lingers in smaller proportion. Together, these shifts trace a chemical fingerprint across the planet. In future ages, long after cities have vanished, sediments will still whisper of this imbalance, a shadow left by human industry. Geologists can read these shadows in the past as well. Ancient warming events, like the Paleocene thermal maximum 56 million years ago, carry isotope anomalies similar to those of today. Temperatures spiked, oceans acidified, ecosystems were shaken. The cause is debated. Massive volcanic eruptions, methane releases, or perhaps something else. Whatever the source, the rocks tell us that carbon left its mark. A shadow still visible tens of millions of years later. This raises the question at the heart of the Silurian hypothesis. If another civilization once burned fuel, would we see its shadow now? The evidence might be subtle, hidden in coal seams or ocean mud. Carbon ratios would shift just as ours are shifting, and future geologists might wonder at the anomaly. Was it nature? Or was it something more deliberate? A hand reaching across time, but invisible, save for its fingerprints. Coal itself is both witness and participant. These black seams, layered through continents, are fossilized forest trees that grew in swampy wetlands hundreds of millions of years ago. They hold the memory of carbon drawn from the air, locked away until humans unearthed it. To burn coal is to release the breath of ancient ferns and towering horsetails. It is also to leave a signal: ash, soot, altered sediments, chemical scars that endure. In the far future, what will remain of our coal plants may not be structures or machines, but isotopic distortions, dark lines of carbon shadow. Ocean mud holds another part of the record. Each year, particles settle, dust, dead plankton, fragments of shell. Buried in those layers are traces of atmospheric change, like a diary written one page at a time. Already, scientists can see the signal of our air eye, the Anthropocene, taking shape in these sediments. Plastics, heavy metals, and isotope shifts mingle with natural deposits. To a future intelligence, this may look like a sudden anomaly, a brief flare of carbon shadow in the long calm of geological time. The persistence of these shadows is both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it means Earth remembers, even when all else is gone. Unsettling because it reminds us that what we do is not easily erased. Our carbon will linger for tens of millions of years, perhaps longer, embedded in stone, woven into the fossil record of tomorrow. And so you drift with the question, could there already be other shadows, written by hands long vanished? Perhaps buried beneath older coal seams lie anomalies we have yet to interpret. Perhaps in ocean sediments, a faint signal whispers of another age of burning, dismissed as volcanic or methane-driven, but carrying the rhythm of something more deliberate. The challenge is not only to find such shadows, but to recognize them for what they are. The Earth is full of signals, and nature itself is a prolific storyteller. Volcanoes pour carbon into the air. Asteroid strikes scatter soot and dust. Methane bursts from the deep ocean in sudden floods. To see human-like industry in the past is to ask if any shadow stands apart, different in shape from these natural processes. Could we tell the difference? Or would all signals blur together, folded into the vast noise of geological history? You imagine holding a rock drilled from the ocean floor. Within its layers, tiny shells of plankton tell of chemical balances long gone. A sudden change lighter, carbon, warmer oceans, acidified, seas appears as a single line, a moment frozen in sediment. To us, it is data. To the Earth, it is memory. To future beings, it might be a question mark, a mystery written in ratios. In this way, carbon shadows are both clue and riddle. They are durable, measurable, enduring for millions of years. Yet they are also ambiguous, open to interpretation, never speaking with absolute clarity. The Earth remembers, but it does not annotate its records. It leaves us to guess at causes, to wonder at meanings. You rest in the thought that even shadows can tell stories. They may not reveal every detail, but they remind us that life leaves marks, however faint. Perhaps we are not the first to cast such a shadow. Perhaps others did, long before us, and their traces linger beneath our feet. And so the question remains, folded softly into stone. Whose shadows are we seeing, and whose are yet to be found? The Earth has always gathered traces of life into stone. Shells pressed into limestone, ferns etched into shale, bones crystallized into fossils. But in this age, something new has entered the record, something that did not exist before us. Plastic, born of chemistry and industry, is already embedding itself in beaches, oceans, and cliffs. It is soft when new, fragile in a human hand. Yet in the language of geology, it becomes a technofossil, a marker that may endure for millions of years. You picture waves, tumbling bottles and fragments, grinding them down until they are as small as grains of sand. These particles settle into sediments, mixing with shells and pebbles. In some places, they are melted by heat, fused with volcanic rock or sand, creating plastic-glomerates, strange hybrids of nature and industry. Already, on distant shores, you can pick up these stones, part basalt, part coral, part rope or bottle. They are artifacts turned into geology, a new page in the Earth's diary. In millions of years, when cliffs erode and future geologists split the rocks open, what will they find? Perhaps thin seams of bright polymers, sharp against the dull tones of natural layers. Perhaps odd inclusions, materials with chemical structures that no volcanic eruption or cosmic event could produce. Plastics are complex, unnatural polymer signatures of deliberate creation. Even if they break apart, their molecular ghosts may persist, locked in the mineral matrix of stone today. Scientists already speak of the Anthropocene, the human-marked epoch, with plastics as one of its clearest signatures. Unlike stone tools or bronze blades, plastics are not easily mistaken for natural products. Their chemistry reveals intent, chains of carbon designed in factories, arranged in forms evolution never built. They are the fingerprints of culture pressed into geology. And here, the Silurian hypothesis turns its quiet eye. If we are leaving plastics in stone, what if another civilization once left its own technofossils? Not plastic, perhaps, but some equivalent artificial alloys, ceramics, molecules unknown to nature. Would we recognize such layers if we found them? Or would they be dismissed as odd mineral seams, misread as volcanic curiosities or ancient accidents of chemistry? The challenge is that time is a relentless editor. Plastics may endure longer than wood or paper, but even they are not eternal. Sunlight, microbes, pressure, and heat break them down. Some may fragment into microplastics, so small they are invisible, dispersed into oceans and soils. Others may transform, fusing with minerals, losing their original form but leaving behind unusual molecular residues. Over millions of years, much will vanish, but perhaps not all. A fraction will survive, enough to hint at their origin to anyone curious enough to look. You imagine a geologist far in the future, standing on a cliff by a sea. They split open a slab of stone, and within it lies a seam filled with strange, glassy fragments, fused, yet unmistakably artificial. To them, it may look like evidence of an age of technology long past, a species that once transformed its world. The discovery may be like finding pottery shards in a ruin, ordinary yet deeply human. And then the question returns. Could we, today, already be walking over such seams from ages before? If another species rose, built, and fell, their materials may have been different, but their traces might remain. Perhaps there are layers we have not yet understood, filled with molecules or alloys whose origin is not volcanic, not cosmic, but cultural. Perhaps they lie hidden, buried too deep, or perhaps we have already touched them without knowing. The thought is both humbling and expansive. Our plastics may one day be a story told by stone. They may outlast cities, languages, even humanity itself. In cliffs of the far future, a thin line of polymer might be all that remains of an entire civilization, our achievements, our failures, our inventions compressed into a seam of plastic rock. You rest in the thought that stone remembers more than we realize, but always incompletely. The story it tells is part silence, part whisper. Plastics are one of our loudest whispers, a bright signal in an otherwise muted record. They remind us that we are not outside geology, but already within it, already writing in its pages, whether we mean to or not. And so you drift into wonder if stone can hold plastics, if cliffs can carry technofossils. Then what other strange seams might be waiting, silent in the earth, carrying the shadows of lives we do not yet know? Stone does not forget fire. Where humans have smelted, refined, and shaped, the earth carries scars. Aluminum, copper, iron, gold each has been lifted from ore and remade into tools, wires, and monuments. Some metals gleam bright when polished, others corrode back to dust, but all leave signals in the rocks. To imagine an earlier civilization is to imagine not only their buildings, which crumble, or their words, which vanish, but their chemistry, altered seams of ore, strange concentrations of once rare elements, fingerprints left in the crust. Aluminum is the most striking example. Though abundant in Earth's crust, it almost never appears as pure metal. It binds tightly with oxygen, locked in minerals like bauxite. Only with smelting an intense and deliberate process does it become the light, silver metal that shapes airplanes, cables, and cans. If we disappeared and time pressed forward millions of years, aluminum might corrode into oxides, blending again with soil. Yet the act of its refinement, the sudden, unnatural distribution of pure aluminum across the globe would leave traces. Future geologists might find unusual deposits, seams of oxidized aluminum, far from natural sources, a quiet sign that fire once worked the stone. Copper tells another story. It was one of the first metals humans shaped, hammered from native nuggets into ornaments and tools. Later, smelting turned ore into rivers of molten copper, feeding wires and engines. Over centuries, copper oxidizes to green and black, a patina that eats away at its surface. Yet, in buried layers, it can persist, often alloyed with tin into bronze or with zinc into brass. If hidden deeply enough, artifacts of copper could survive longer than cities, longer than written words, glowing faintly as anomalies in stone. Iron, too, leaves shadows. Pure iron rusts quickly, but alloyed into steel, it can endure for centuries, sometimes millennia. Mines carved by humans leave behind their own signals, sudden voids in rock, spoil heaps filled with tailings, altered mineral chemistry where furnaces once burned. Even when abandoned, these traces linger. To a future age, unusual concentrations of iron oxides might stand out as patterns of industry, as deliberate rearrangements of the crust. Gold is different. Resistant to corrosion, it survives almost unchanged. A thin band of gold leaf, a buried ornament, a coin left in the soil, these could persist almost indefinitely if sealed within stone. To a civilization millions of years from now, the unnatural clustering of gold in certain layers might seem strange. Why here? Why now, in such unnatural abundance? The answer would whisper of hands that gathered and shaped it, and then you drift into deeper time, imagining not only our traces, but others. If an earlier civilization once walked the earth, mining and smelting, would we recognize their shadows? Perhaps unusual seams of pure metal, where no natural process could explain them, already exist. Perhaps we have walked past them, dismissing them as odd curiosities of geology, never realizing they might be technosignatures. Mines, once breathing fire and smoke, would collapse and fill with water, their mouths hidden by forests or deserts. Yet their waste slag heaps, chemical residues, altered rock could still linger, faint marks of industry. Stone is patient, but not perfect. Weather wears down slag piles. Oceans recycle minerals. The crust itself shifts, subducting old layers into the mantle. Much of what humans create will vanish into these processes. Yet not everything, just as fossils survive by chance, so too might the traces of smelting. A vein of aluminum oxides in unexpected purity, a cluster of rare alloys preserved in sediment, a chemical fingerprint pointing to hands long gone. You rest in the thought that metals are both fragile and enduring. Fragile because tools rust, corrode. Enduring because the act of smelting reshapes the earth in ways that nature does not easily mimic. Even when objects are gone, the residue remains, written in the subtle chemistry of stone. And so you imagine minds that once breathed fire, now collapsed, silent, forgotten. You picture slag heaps hidden beneath meadows, rust buried under rivers, alloys entombed in cliffs. The ruins may be gone, but the metals whisper still, quiet signals of the hands that shaped them. Close your eyes and let yourself sink into time, deep time, far beyond the reach of history, beyond the reach of written records or human memory. Imagine the Earth not as the planet you know now, but as a breathing, restless being whose chest has risen and fallen for millions of years. Each breath is a change of climate, warm pulses, cool sighs, sudden gasps. The rocks and the ice, remember them all. Tonight, you step gently into this memory, wandering through the record of ancient climate spikes. Ice cores are the diaries of the planet. In Antarctica and Greenland, deep cylinders of frozen history are pulled from beneath the surface. Each layer of snow that once fell has been pressed into ice, trapping bubbles of air like tiny glass beads. Inside each bubble is the atmosphere of long ago, a snapshot of the breath of the world. Scientists, kneeling at their microscopes, can taste the carbon dioxide and methane of an age when mammoths still roamed, or when forests stretched across lands now barren. As you imagine these cores stacked high in laboratories, you feel the silence they carry, the frozen patience of centuries compressed into columns of frost. What they reveal is not a smooth, gentle rhythm. Instead, the story is jagged, full of sudden leaps and plunges. A warming here, a cooling there. Some changes unfold over millennia, but others arrive in decades, a blink of geological time. These are the spikes. The planet's pulse quickening without warning. Temperatures rising rapidly, ice retreating, oceans shifting. You let your mind drift to those moments, imagining what it would feel like to stand on the Earth as its breath suddenly grew hotter, the seasons sliding out of balance. One famous event is the Paleocene thermal maximum, or PTM, 56 million years ago. The Earth warmed by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in a matter of thousands of years. Oceans acidified, forests crept into the polar regions, and new mammals spread across the land. For decades, scientists have puzzled over the cause. Was it volcanoes? Methane released from ocean floors? Or was there something else, something stranger? Some researchers, half in jest, half in curiosity, whisper about the Silurian hypothesis, the idea that perhaps an ancient industrial civilization, long lost and erased, might have left its fingerprint in the climate record. The thought is both eerie and comforting. Eerie, because it suggests that we might not be the first to walk this road of technology and consequence. Comforting, because it means the Earth forgets. Even if something once was, the planet healed, forests grew, oceans reset. You imagine standing in that long-ago world, breathing air warmer and heavier than today's, wondering whether unseen hands once shaped it. But most evidence points to natural causes. Volcanoes spewing carbon, tectonic shifts cracking the seabed, methane ice thawing in great underwater bursts. The planet has its own engines of change, its own ways of shocking itself awake. And yet, as you breathe, you notice how small the distance feels between natural pulse and human echo. Our age of carbon release looks, in the data, not unlike the PETM's sudden burst. The lines on the graph climb steeply, a mirror tilted toward the past. The spikes remind you that climate is not a slow, patient background. It is alive, reactive, sensitive. Push it gently, and it may sway. Push it harder, and it may lurch, tumbling into a new balance altogether. Earth has always been resilient, but resilience comes with scars. Every warming left its mark. Extinctions, migrations, reshaped landscapes. The quiet ice holds these scars like folded pages. Now, picture yourself walking across an ancient plain, grass swaying against your ankles. The air is warmer than you expect. You hear insects buzzing with restless energy, and somewhere in the distance, a river runs faster with melt. You don't know if this is 10,000 years ago or 10 million. You only know that the warmth you feel was sudden, disruptive. The animals know it too. Their patterns shift. Their ranges stretch northward. Climate is not an abstract line on a graph. Here it is hunger, movement, adaptation. Your breath slows. You realize that in these moments of rapid change, life either bends or breaks. The fossil record shows both. Species disappearing without return, others blossoming in the cracks of opportunity. The climate spikes are thresholds, doors between worlds. They open quickly and close just as fast. To pass through is to transform. And here, in this twilight of thought, you wonder, could the climate itself be a memory of activity? Every spike, every rush of heat is an inscription on the Earth's diary. Volcanoes inscribe in ash, oceans in chemistry, humans in carbon. Each leaves a signature, a whisper to those who come after. But whispers fade. If an industrial age existed long before ours, perhaps all that remains is this ghost in the graph's sudden warming. Unexplained, unresolved, you let this possibility drift, like a lantern across the surface of your mind. Whether it is true or not matters less than the feeling it brings. The awareness that our own time is also becoming a layer in the ice. Centuries from now, cores may be drilled that trap bubbles of 21st century air. Future beings may hold those samples and wonder about us the way we wonder about those before. Were we natural? Were we inevitable? Were we careful? Breathe again. The question lingers in the air like mist. Is the Earth's climate a conversation? With each spike, a sentence, each pause, a silence. If so, then we are mid-sentence now, still writing our part. What will the next words be? As you prepare to leave this chapter, the ice cores fade into memory. The frozen bubbles close like eyes, going to sleep. But the thought stays with you, that within the planet's breath, there are stories of warmth, stories of change, stories of memory. Some natural, some perhaps not. All of them echo. And with that echo still in your mind, you begin to drift toward the next wonder. If the climate can remember, then what else in the earth might carry memory hidden, patient, waiting for us to listen? Close your eyes and imagine yourself sinking, not falling, not rushing, but drifting slowly through the cool body of the ocean. Sunlight fades above you, soft at first, then dimmer, until the blue becomes a heavy indigo, then finally black. Around you, the water grows still, almost eternal in its calm. You are descending into a place where time itself seems to pause. At the bottom, where light no longer travels, lies the Earth's longest memory, the sediments of the ocean floor. Each grain of sediment is a fragment of history. Dust blown from deserts, ash from distant volcanoes, shells of tiny plankton that once floated near the surface. All of it settles slowly through the water. Some grains take weeks to drift down, others take centuries, but no matter how long, they always reach the floor. There they rest, forming layers, one upon another, quiet and unbroken. Over millions of years, these layers become the pages of a vast, unending book, the library of the sea. In this library, each chapter is written not with words, but with chemistry. Ratios of oxygen in tiny shells tell of past temperatures. Concentrations of carbon reveal the breadth of the atmosphere. Traces of pollen washed in by rivers describe forests long vanished. Even the faint dust of meteors, sprinkled invisibly across the world, finds its way here, pressed into the record. You picture these pages as translucent sheets stacked endlessly, stretching back not thousands, but tens of millions of years. A quiet, meticulous archive kept by no hand, needing no ink. As you breathe slowly, you imagine yourself holding a core of this sediment, pulled from the seafloor by patient scientists aboard a research ship. The core is long and slender, sealed in plastic, but when cut open, it reveals bands of color, pale clays, dark organic matter, specks of white from shells, streaks of ash. Each band is a season, a century, a moment of climate. When you run your inner gaze across these bands, you feel as though you are brushing your fingertips across the wrinkles of Earth's face. The ocean keeps secrets longer than ice. Ice melts, but sediment persists, buried safely beneath miles of water. Where glaciers record hundreds of thousands of years, the ocean records tens of millions. It remembers warm ages when crocodiles wandered the Arctic, and cold ages when ice sheets wrapped continents. It remembers mass extinctions when the deep sea filled with darkness as surface life collapsed. It remembers subtle changes to quiet shifts in currents, faint pulses of chemistry. Everything leaves a trace. Picture the foraminifera, microscopic creatures with shells of calcium carbonate. When they die, they sink, forming carpets across the seafloor. Each shell holds within it a chemical fingerprint of the water in which it lived, the temperature, the salinity, the nutrients. Multiply this by trillions of shells, year after year, and the seafloor becomes an encyclopedia written by plankton. These shells are no larger than grains of sand, yet together they are a collective memory so vast it humbles imagination. You let your breath follow the rhythm of sediment falling. Inhale and picture grains of dust drifting downward. Exhale and imagine them settling into place, locking themselves into the archive. Slowly, steadily, the layers deepen. The ocean is not in a hurry. Its library is endless, patient, content to wait until someone, someday, chooses to read, and people have read. Ocean drilling projects, massive undertakings of science, send drills thousands of meters into the seabed, pulling up cores that span epochs. From them we learn about ancient monsoons, about how Earth's tilt-shaped ice ages, about how sudden spikes of carbon once reshaped climates. We even find hints of catastrophes, the thin clay line rich in iridium that marks the day an asteroid ended the age of dinosaurs. That thin line is not just rock, it is silence, the silence of millions of creatures gone in an instant. You pause here, letting that silence sink into you, like a bell tone fading in the dark. The ocean's memory also speaks of rhythm. The layers rise and fall in cycles, like breaths, cycles of carbon, cycles of ice, cycles of warmth. These rhythms are driven by Earth's orbit, by wobbles and tilts that adjust sunlight in patterns lasting tens of thousands of years. In sediment, you see these patterns etched as repeating bands. Warm, cool, warm again. The ocean floor is like a metronome, ticking through eternity. And yet, within this rhythm, there are interruptions, moments when the steady beat falters, when a sharp spike of warmth or cold tears through the record. These are the fingerprints of change, sudden and dramatic. Volcanoes, impacts, collapses of ice sheets. And now, in modern cores, the sudden rise of carbon from human activity appears as one more spike, one more disruption added to the archive. You reflect on this, realizing that we, too, are now authors in this library, whether we intend to be or not, as you drift deeper into thought. Imagine that you could walk along the seafloor library as though it were a hallway. On each side, layers stretch like shelves, endless and silent. You run your hand along them and feel textures change, gritty with sand, soft with clay, fragile with shells. Each texture is a chapter, each chapter a story of an age. Some shelves are thick, filled with abundance. Others are thin, whispering of famine. The hallway is dim, lit only by the glow of your own curiosity, but you sense the weight of all that has been stored here, waiting. The ocean's silent memory is not only scientific, it is also poetic, for it shows that nothing is ever truly lost. Even the smallest trace a grain of ash, a shell the width of a hair can, endure for millions of years. These traces do not speak loudly, but together they form a chorus so vast that it carries the very song of Earth itself. Take another slow breath. Feel the vastness of this truth settle gently on your chest, that the ocean has been writing, without pause, for longer than any library of human hands. Its writing is patient, impartial. It remembers not just triumphs, but mistakes, not just blooms of life, but collapses. And in that memory, it teaches humility. We are but one more layer, one more whisper, settling toward the bottom. You linger in this awareness, letting it soothe you. The ocean is not judgmental. It does not choose what to record. It accepts everything, faithfully, silently. It reminds you that memory is not about choosing what to keep, but about holding space for all that happens. You, too, can carry your own layers, moments of joy, moments of grief, all settling into the sediment of your being. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. And so, as this chapter nears its end, you lift your gaze from the ocean floor. The sediments fade into mist, but their message remains. The earth carries its memory, not in words, but in layers, in quiet accumulations that ask only to be seen. You rise slowly, drifting back toward the surface of your mind, but with the library of the sea still echoing in your thoughts. Ahead lies a new question, soft and unresolved. If the oceans can remember in silence, what about the land? Could mountains, too, hold stories written in stone, waiting for someone to listen? Close your eyes and picture the earth not as a still, unmoving sphere, but as a restless being, always shifting, always changing. Beneath your feet, though you feel only stability, the ground itself is part of a vast, slow river of stone. The continents glide like rafts across an ocean of mantle. The sea floor spreads, folds, and dives, consumed again into the deep. Nothing upon the surface is permanent. The planet does not only record, it also erases. This is geological amnesia. Imagine opening a diary and finding that entire pages have been torn away. Sentences that once told of a forest, a sea, a city are missing. Only fragments remain at the edges. The Earth's crust is such a diary, written in stone, but constantly rewritten. Volcanoes pour fresh pages of basalt across the seafloor. Subduction zones pull these pages back under, folding them into heat and pressure until they melt into new chapters. What was once clear becomes unreadable. What was once a story is now only ash. You drift into the thought of tectonic plates, massive slabs of crust floating atop the mantle's slow convective currents. They collide and mountains rise. They separate and oceans open. They grind past one another, carving scars that shimmer with earthquakes. But the most profound motion is the recycling. Seafloor sliding downward into trenches, vanishing into fire, carrying with it the records of its birth. If the ocean's sediments are Earth's library, then plate tectonics is the librarian who sometimes burns the books. Consider this. The oldest seafloor on the planet is no more than about 200 million years old. To human imagination, that is vast. But to geological time, it is recent, only a fragment of the planet's history. The crust beneath your feet is younger than the dinosaurs, younger even than many mammals. Where, then, are the older stories? They are gone, subducted, erased, transformed into magma, and born again as new rock. The seafloor forgets itself almost as quickly as it forms. You let this realization wash over you like a tide, that much of Earth's memory is gone, forever unreachable. If civilizations had risen long before us, their traces on the ocean floor would likely be erased. If forests once flourished where seas now spread, their roots and trunks are long melted into the mantle. The Earth is not an impartial archivist. It chooses, or rather, its processes choose. Some stories are preserved, others lost, and time itself is the editor. But not all memory vanishes. Fragments escape the fire. Continents, being lighter than ocean crust, often float above destruction, preserving scars billions of years old. In Greenland, in Australia, in Canada, ancient cratons hold rocks more than 3 billion years in age, whispers of an Earth so young it was still cooling, still forming oceans. These rare survivors are like scraps of an ancient diary, rescued from a fire. Their edges charred, but their words still legible. You hold them gently in your imagination, feeling their fragile endurance, and yet even the countenance are restless. Mountains rise and crumble, worn down by wind and rain. Sediments wash to the sea, hardened into stone, lifted again in new ranges. Rivers carve valleys, glaciers scrape scars. The surface is always rewritten. You realize that the earth has two kinds of memory, one that is long but imperfect, and one that is detailed but fleeting. Geological amnesia is the price of motion, the cost of a living planet. Breathe slowly. Imagine yourself standing at the rim of a subduction trench, looking down into darkness where one plate plunges beneath another. You feel the weight of continents sliding into the mantle, their stories carried with them. Volcanoes rise nearby, erupting with new stone that will someday tell its own tale. It is a cycle of forgetting and remembering, of loss and renewal. The earth cannot keep everything, but in its forgetting, it makes room for new stories. Pause here and notice how this forgetting mirrors your own. Memory fades, events blur, and yet life continues, richer for the change. You, too, rewrite yourself, sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity. Like the planet, you carry scars of what remains and the silence of what is gone. The amnesia is not a flaw. It is part of the rhythm of being dot. Now return to the deep past. Imagine supercontinents forming and breaking, apart, Pangaea. Each one rose as fragments collided, then shattered again as rifts opened. The surface of Earth is like a puzzle that never settles. Each rearrangement hides some stories and reveals others. Entire coastlines sink and are reborn. Mountain ranges vanish into plains. Oceans close as others open. The diary of Earth is rewritten not once but endlessly. Its language fluid, its chapters never final. And so, the search for ancient climate, ancient life, ancient civilizations is always incomplete. Scientists know this. They speak of gaps, of missing records, of unconformities, places where rock layers skip over time, where thousands or millions of years are gone with no trace. The Earth leaves blanks in its diary, and we can only guess what filled them. Sometimes we imagine great forests. Sometimes we imagine deserts. Sometimes we even wonder if there were other hands, other minds that left only faint echoes before being erased. Geological amnesia makes such questions both haunting and impossible to answer. Breathe again. Notice how the thought does not bring fear but calm. Forgetting is part of remembering. Erasure is part of writing. If the earth kept every detail, it would drown in its own weight. Instead, it curates, holding fragments that are enough to tell the story, even if not all of it. What matters is not the completeness of the record, but the continuity of life that has flowed through it. The planet forgets, and yet life endures. You picture magma rising through mid-ocean ridges, new crust forming where none was before. Hot, dark stone emerges, cools, and spreads outward. Already, sediment begins to fall on it, new words on a fresh page. But in a few 100 million years, this crust will slide back into the mantle, forgotten. And so the diary continues. Write, erase, write again. A rhythm both destructive and creative. The thought drifts outward into metaphor. You realize that you, too, are like the earth, always rewriting, always erasing, and beginning again. Old habits vanish, new patterns form. Memories fade, but meaning remains. The story of you is not every detail preserved, but the arc that emerges from what endures. Geological amnesia is not destruction, but transformation. Let your breath grow slow, steady, like the creeping pace of tectonic plates. Millimeters each year, yet mountains rise, oceans shift, worlds are remade. The patience of the earth is beyond measure, and its forgetfulness is part of its patience. Nothing is urgent, nothing is final. And as this chapter closes, you hold a gentle reflection that the earth is both a remembering and a forgetting being. Its archives are partial, its diary rewritten, its pages sometimes lost to fire. Yet enough survives for us to read, to wonder, to imagine. And in those gaps, in those silences, we find room for curiosity, room for mystery, room for dreaming. You drift now toward the next question, unresolved but softly beckoning. If the earth forgets, then what of the sky above it? Does space, too, have memory, or is it a canvas forever blank, waiting to be written upon? Close your eyes and drift upward, away from the mantle's heat and the shifting crust. You rise into the world of human memory, a different kind of archive, one that lives not in stone but in voices carried across generations like whispers in the dark. Unlike rock or ice, this memory is fragile, subject to forgetting, reshaping, retelling. Yet it survives, sometimes for thousands of years. These are the myths. Every culture has them. Stories of beginnings, of disasters, of floods, of lost lands swallowed by sea. They are not records in the way that sediments or ice cores are records, but they echo with resonance. A myth is not a diary entry. It is a song, refined over time, shaped by repetition, guided by meaning. And yet, in these songs, you sometimes hear something familiar, an echo of events that science, too, finds traces of. Consider the flood myths. From Mesopotamia comes the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which a man is warned to build a great boat to survive the waters. From Hebrew scripture comes the story of Noah, his ark resting on mountains as the flood recedes. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned by a fish of an oncoming deluge and saves humanity by binding his boat to a horn. Across Polynesia, in the Americas, in Africa, in Europe, the tales repeat. The world drowned once, and only a few survived. Could they all be coincidence? Perhaps. Floods are common. Rivers swell. Storms rage. And communities remember. But could they also echo some larger truth? Glacial melts, rising seas at the end of the last ice age, when coastlines shifted and lands were swallowed. The science shows that 12,000 years ago, seas did rise rapidly. Shorelines retreated. Settlements, if they existed near the water, would have vanished. The myths may not be evidence, but they may be memory, refracted through imagination. You picture yourself sitting by a fire thousands of years ago. The night is silent except for the wind. Around you, a circle of people listens to an elder speak. His words are not written. They float in the air, painting visions of gods, of storms, of a time when the ocean was not where it is now. The children lean closer, wide-eyed. The story will pass to them, then to their children. It is not exact, not precise, yet within it lies a seed of something once lived. This is the comfort of myth, that imagination, too, remembers. Even when facts are blurred, when details are altered, the feeling endures. Fear of water rising, awe at fire in the sky, reverence for mountains, forests, animals. Myth keeps not the event, but the emotion. It preserves how it felt to live through change. Other myths speak of lost lands. Atlantis, described by Plato, was a mighty civilization swallowed by the sea. In other traditions, there are stories of Lyoness off the coast of Cornwall, of Kumari Kandam in Tamil legend, of lands that once were but are now beneath the waves. Science does not confirm these places, yet it does confirm that land has been lost, coastlines drowned, islands sunk. Again, myth is not evidence, but it is echo. You breathe slowly, feeling the rhythm of these echoes. Inhale, a flood myth told on one continent. Exhale, a flood myth told on another. Together, they form a pattern like waves crossing an ocean. Myth, in this sense, is like the sediment of the mind. Each generation lays down a thin layer of story. Over centuries, those layers accumulate into a shared memory, imperfect but enduring. And it is not only disasters that myths remember. They also carry the beginnings. Creation stories speak of the earth formed from chaos, from darkness, from water, from the body of a cosmic being. The details differ, but the impulse is the same, to explain origins. Some of these tales, scholars suggest, may echo ancient understandings of the stars, of fertility cycles, of the way the seasons turned. Again, not evidence in the scientific sense, but a trace of how humans watched the world and made meaning. Pause here. Notice how this human memory differs from geological memory. Rocks do not care if they are understood. Ice does not sing. The ocean does not embellish. But humans do. We embroider memory with meaning, color it with metaphor, wrap it in characters and dialogue. The facts may fade, but the feeling grows. Myth is both less reliable and more profound. It preserves not only what happened, but what it meant. Imagine myths as lanterns drifting on a dark river. Each lantern carries a story, its flame flickering. Some drift far, crossing cultures, changing shapes as they go. Others remain close, tied to a particular place or people. Together, they illuminate a river of time, not with clarity, but with warmth. To follow them is to glimpse not what was, but how it was remembered, how it was feared, how it was loved. Science often approaches myth with caution. Evidence must be physical, rocks, bones, artifacts. But even scientists sometimes listen to myths as guides. Stories of great fires, of falling stars, of endless nights have led researchers to search for comets, volcanic eruptions, eclipses. Stories of vanished animals align with fossil evidence. Again, not proof, but a compass. Myth points, science confirms. Together, they weave a richer picture of the past. Breathe again, and feel the comfort in this thought, that even imagination is a record. You may forget facts, but you rarely forget stories. They linger, reshaped, retold, woven into dreams. Myths are humanity's way of being remembered, even when the earth forgets. Where tectonics erases, where oceans bury, human minds preserve not perfectly, not reliably, but deeply. And in this way, you see how memory is not only in ice, not only in rock, not only in sediment. It is also in you, in your imagination, in the myths you carry without knowing. Every fairy tale, every legend, every bedtime story is another layer in the soft geology of the mind. Take another breath. Let yourself drift through this library of human voices. Hear the flood myths, the creation songs, the tales of lost lands. Feel how they echo across cultures, how they rhyme without meeting. Let them remind you that memory takes many forms: stone, ice, ocean, story. Each has its own truth. And as you prepare to leave this chapter, you sense a gentle invitation. If myths are echoes, then what else might echo through time? Could language itself, the very words we speak, carry ancient memories hidden in their roots? Could words be fossils, small shells of thought that endure across ages? The question lingers, soft and unresolved, guiding you forward like the next lantern on the river. Close your eyes and imagine time stretching backward, farther and farther, until even the myths grow silent. You pass beyond the rise of empires, beyond the first carved stones, beyond the first human step. The years fall away like leaves in a river, flowing past you in endless motion. And then, when the water grows deep enough, you find yourself in an age before us. An age of scales and thunder, of creatures so vast they seemed to carry the world itself. The age of dinosaurs. For 160 million years they reigned, through forests thicker than memory, across plains where giant dragonflies hummed, and seas where reptilian leviathans swam. Compared to our own history mere thousands of years, their time was unimaginably long. Civilizations rise and fall for us in centuries. Entire cultures vanish in decades. Yet the dinosaurs endured, not for centuries, but for eras. It is almost unthinkable that nothing of intelligence could have stirred among them. You picture a small, feathered creature, no larger than a crow, stepping carefully through ferns. Its eyes are bright, its claws delicate. It tilts its head at a stone, curious. Could it, perhaps, have used that stone? Could there have been moments, scattered like sparks, across those long ages, when thought reached a little farther, when behavior shifted toward something like invention? If so, would we ever know? Here, the Earth's geological amnesia returns to mind. The crust is rewritten, the seafloor recycled, the surface scoured by time. A wooden tool would rot, a bone carving would crumble. Even a city of stone might be ground into dust by glaciers, subducted into the mantle, or buried beneath oceans. If another civilization had flickered in those ancient ages, how faint would its traces be? You drift in this thought, not to seek proof, but to let the wonder soothe you, like waves rocking a quiet boat. Scientists ask this question from time to time, not because they believe it likely, but because it is a useful way to reflect. They call it the Silurian hypothesis. Could evidence of an ancient industrial civilization exist in the geological record? And if so, what would remain? Their conclusion is sobering. Almost nothing. Perhaps only chemical fingerprints, unusual spikes in carbon, synthetic molecules that nature rarely makes, subtle shifts in isotope ratios. The rest would be erased, folded into the Earth's amnesia, and so you drift in imagination, not in proof. You picture dinosaurs, not only as hunters and grazers, but perhaps as thinkers, experimenters, a lineage that may have tried something, failed, and was forgotten, or perhaps not. Perhaps intelligence is rare, and only we have walked this path. Either way, the question itself carries beauty. Your breath slows as you realize how brief our own story has been compared to theirs. Humans have walked the earth for less than 500,000 years. Civilization, our cities, our books, our machines is scarcely 10,000 years old. A blink compared to the long reign of the dinosaurs. If they could vanish after 160 million years, what does that say of us in our fragile moment? The thought does not frighten you. Instead, it humbles you, softening the edges of your urgency. Now, imagine wandering through a Cretaceous forest. The air is heavy, humid, rich with the scent of resin. Towering conifers rise above you, their needles whispering in the breeze. Ferns carpet the ground, while dragonflies with wingspans like hawks drift lazily through shafts of light. You hear the distant rumble of something massive moving through the undergrowth. But here, in a clearing, you find smaller creatures, bird-like, agile, watching with sharp eyes. They seem alert, aware, in a way that feels different. Not human, not even mammalian, but attentive, curious. You sense a spark. What if such sparks happened countless times in deep history, but never caught fire? What if intelligence is not a single ladder to climb, but a match that sometimes flares and dies, leaving only smoke? Civilizations might be like constellations' patterns, seen only from a distance, their individual stars long extinguished. You drift in that image, stars and sparks mingling, both fleeting, both beautiful. Some myths, too, speak of forgotten ages before humans, lost worlds, elder beings, ancient orders swept away. Perhaps these are not memories of actual civilizations, but echoes of the human sense that we are not the first to walk here. Standing among fossils, seeing the bones of giants, it is natural to wonder, what stories did these creatures live? What possibilities did the earth explore before us? The ocean floor remembers some of their passing. Layers of sediment mark the sudden end of their reign 66 million years ago, when an asteroid struck and fire rained from the skies. A thin band of clay, rich in iridium, scattered across the world, is all that remains of that moment. Entire dynasties of dinosaurs vanished in an instant, reduced to a layer no thicker than a sheet of paper. You let this thought settle over you like dusk. Even the greatest empires of life can leave only whispers. And so, even if intelligence bloomed and died long before us, we might never know. But the not knowing is gentle. It reminds you that certainty is not required for peace. Wonder itself is enough. You rest in the mystery, letting it rock you like the dark sea. The possibility also makes you reflect on the future. If another being, millions of years from now, were to dig into the record, what would they find of us? A layer of plastic polymers, perhaps. Strange isotopes from nuclear fission. Spikes of carbon from our brief but intense age. Maybe nothing more. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our books all may vanish, ground into dust, subducted, forgotten. We, too, may become an echo. But echoes are not emptiness. They are resonance, lingering sound. Even if forgotten, we were here, and the earth will have felt us. The dinosaurs were here, and the earth still holds their bones, their imprints in stone, their memory in fossils. Perhaps some of them dreamed, perhaps some of them wondered. Perhaps that is enough. Take a slow breath. Notice how the question itself is soothing, like a lullaby without words. Could there have been civilizations before us? Perhaps, perhaps not. The answer matters less than the humility. It brings the sense that we are part of a far vaster story than we can ever fully read. As the chapter drifts to its close, you imagine the earth as a stage upon which many acts have already played. Some acts we know, the trilobites, the ammonites, the dinosaurs. Others we only guess. Others are gone without trace, but the stage remains and the play continues. We are part of the latest act, but not the last. The curtain is never final. You rest in that thought, and in the silence it brings. The mystery of forgotten civilizations does not demand an answer. It only invites wonder, and wonder is enough. And as you prepare to step forward, you feel a gentle pull toward the next question, soft and unresolved. If civilizations may come and go, then what about life itself? Could existence rise, vanish, and rise again, not just here, but across the stars? Close your eyes and imagine rising gently from the earth, drifting beyond the clouds, past the thin veil of atmosphere that keeps us warm and breathing. The blue marble shrinks below, oceans and continents wrapped in swirling white. You ascend further, and soon Earth is no longer alone. Around you glimmer other worlds' planets that share our sun, but not our fate. Venus, shrouded in veils of cloud. Mars, pale and rust-red, silent beneath its thin sky. They are not only neighbors, they are mirrors. The thought unfolds slowly, like a ripple across still water. By looking at other planets, we are also looking at versions of ourselves. Each world is a possibility Earth might have taken, or might yet take. Each holds stories of climate, geology, and perhaps even life. And when we search their surfaces for signs of civilizations, we are also, in a way, asking whether Earth's own possible past, its forgotten ages, could ever have been real. Take a breath and let your attention drift toward Venus. To the naked eye, it shines as the brightest planet in our sky, a jewel just after sunset. But up close, it is not gentle. Its atmosphere is thick with carbon dioxide, its clouds laced with sulfuric acid. The surface bakes at nearly 460 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. Yet once, long ago, it may not have been so. Some models suggest that Venus could have had oceans, a temperate climate, even conditions suitable for life. Perhaps for billions of years, Venus was not a hell, but a sister. If that is true, then what happened? Did its greenhouse gases spiral beyond control? Did volcanic outpourings tip the balance? Whatever the cause, Venus stands now as a silent warning, a planet that may have lost its memory of gentler days. If there were once seas, they have boiled away. If there was once life, it has left no trace we can yet see. The mirror it holds up to us is haunting, that habitability can vanish, that worlds can forget. Dry, cold, its thin air barely able to support a whisper of wind yet. Everywhere are scars of water. Ancient riverbeds snake across its surface. Delta fans spread like fossilized hands. craters bear signs of lakes that once filled and drained. Billions of years ago, Mars had oceans, perhaps even a magnetic shield to hold its atmosphere close. It may have been blue, alive, a cousin to Earth. If life ever stirred there, if it ever built communities, if it ever left behind tools or structures, what remains now? Only dust, rocks, silence. The surface has been scoured by time, eroded by sandstorms, bombarded by meteorites. If there were stories, they are buried. And so Mars becomes another mirror, reflecting back our own fragility. Civilizations, even if they arose elsewhere, may leave little behind once planets move on, once climates shift, once atmospheres are lost. Scientists search these worlds not only for living microbes, but for what they call technosignatures, evidence of industry, of technology, of intelligence. Strange gases out of balance, geometric patterns, artifacts half buried in dust. They do not expect to find them, but by searching, they test a deeper question. If intelligent life can vanish without a trace on other planets, could it have vanished here too? The search outward becomes a way of reflecting inward. You breathe gently, feeling the rhythm of this thought. Inhale the possibility of other civilizations. Exhale the recognition of silence. Together they form a meditation on impermanence. The universe is vast, yet so far it has shown us quiet. Stars burn, galaxies spin, but civilizations, if they exist, do not announce themselves loudly. Perhaps they flare and fade quickly. Perhaps they leave only chemical footprints, faint and ambiguous. Perhaps their stories are erased, just as Earth erases so much of its own. Now imagine walking across the surface of Mars. The sky is pale, almost butterscotch, the horizon dusty and cold. In the distance, you see the dry bed of a river, its curves frozen in place for billions of years. You kneel and run your hand across the soil. It feels like powdered rust. Nothing else moves. And yet, in the silence, you hear echoes, not sounds, but the weight of possibility. Could someone else have once walked here, long before us? If so, where is their memory now? Turn then to Venus, descending through its thick atmosphere. The pressure is immense, the air choking, the heat unbearable. But imagine, just for a moment, that beneath the clouds there once were oceans, lapping gently against volcanic shores. Imagine a world green with possibility. If intelligence had bloomed there, what record would remain under these crushing skies? None that we can yet find. The silence of Venus is complete. Its mirror shows us what it means to be forgotten. Pause here and let that image settle in you. Two planets, close to us, familiar in some ways, yet utterly silent. They remind us that Earth's story is not inevitable. Life here is precious, fragile, contingent. The fact that we stand, breathe, think, and wonder is not the rule, it is the exception. Mars and Venus whisper this truth back to us. We are rare, and rarity must be cherished. The search for extraterrestrial mirrors is not only about other worlds. It is also about humility. By asking whether Mars or Venus once held life, we are forced to recognize how little of Earth's own history may be accessible. Geological amnesia, floods, extinctions, all could have erased traces of earlier experiments with intelligence. If we cannot find civilizations on Mars or Venus, Perhaps it is because civilizations, by their very nature, vanish quickly. Perhaps silence is the default, and yet silence is not absence. It is invitation. The quiet of Mars makes us listen more closely to the faint traces organic molecules in its soil, methane plumes in its air. The quiet of Venus inspires new missions, probes designed to test its high clouds for strange chemistry. Silence makes us ask, and in the asking, we learn more about ourselves. Take another slow breath. Imagine Earth as one jewel among many, each planet a mirror reflecting a different path. One mirror shows a world that grew too hot. Another shows a world that grew too cold. Ours shows a world still balanced, still alive, for now. The reflections are not predictions, but they are reminders. They remind us that memory is fragile, that forgetting is possible, that continuity is never guaranteed. And yet there is beauty here too. For if silence reigns across Mars and Venus, then our voices, our stories, our myths, are rare songs in a quiet universe. The very act of wondering whether others came before makes us part of the great conversation. Even if no answer comes, the question itself is music. As the chapter nears its end, you hold on to this thought. When we search other planets, we are not only explorers of space, but explorers of time. We are asking whether Earth's forgotten chapters might be mirrored elsewhere. We are seeking ourselves, reflected back across the cosmos. Sometimes the mirrors are empty, sometimes they are broken, but they always teach us something about what it means to endure, to be fragile, to dream. And with that reflection lingering, you prepare to drift into the next chapter. The question rises softly, unresolved. If the planets around us are mirrors, then what of the stars beyond? Could their light carry the faintest trace of civilizations too far to touch, yet close enough to imagine? Close your eyes and take a slow breath. Feel the air fill your lungs, cool and invisible. It seems so light, so fleeting, and yet this air carries stories. Each molecule has traveled across oceans, through forests, into the mouths of animals, out again into the open sky. Air is not only what we breathe, it is history, endlessly circulating. And in certain places on Earth, that history is preserved in a way so delicate, so astonishing, that it becomes a true time capsule. Bubbles of ancient air trapped in ice. Imagine standing on the white expanse of Antarctica. The snow beneath your boots has been falling, flake upon flake, for tens of thousands of years. Each winter adds a layer. Each layer presses the one below. Over centuries, the snow compresses into ice, and within it, tiny pockets of atmosphere are sealed bubbles, fragile and perfect. They are as clear as glass, but what they hold is invisible. The breath of Earth long ago. Scientists drill deep into this frozen memory, pulling up long, slender cylinders of ice. When they slice them open, the bubbles hiss faintly, releasing gases that have been locked away for hundreds of thousands of years. Inside is air once breathed by mammoths, once stirred by winds that crossed primeval forests, once exhaled by fires burning in grasslands no longer there. Each bubble is a small museum holding not artifacts of stone, but the very air of another world. As you breathe slowly now, imagine inhaling not the present atmosphere, but that of 100,000 years ago. Less carbon dioxide, different traces of methane. a rhythm of ice ages written in the chemistry. The air is thinner, cooler, quieter. You are breathing the memory of glaciers, of tundra, of vast herds roaming under colder skies. These ice bubbles reveal cycles. Carbon dioxide rises, then falls. Methane climbs, then recedes. Temperature follows, swinging like a pendulum over hundreds of thousands of years. The rhythm is steady, like the beating of a great heart. Forests grow, fires burn, deserts spread, ice advances, ice retreats. The planet inhales and exhales, and the record of those breaths remains, pressed gently into the frozen cores. You let the rhythm steady your own breathing. Inhale as the earth warms. Exhale as the earth cools. Inhale, forests expanding. Exhale, glaciers returning. Each cycle is long, patient, beyond human time. Yet it is all here, whispering from within the bubbles. And then, in the most recent layers, something different appears. The cycles break. Carbon dioxide rises steeply, higher than at any point in the last 800,000 years. Methane surges. The quiet rhythm of natural change gives way to a sharp upward spike, like a sudden shout in a song that had always been gentle. This, too, is preserved. The air itself remembers our industrial age, sealing it in ice for whoever comes after. Future beings will drill and find our signature, just as we find those of the past. The archaeology of air is ongoing. Pause for a moment and let that realization sink in. When you exhale, you are adding to the record, not only in the sky above, but in the snow that will someday be pressed into ice. Your breath will remain. The archaeology of air is not distant. It includes you. Air remembers more than gases. Within its chemistry are clues to forests once burned, releasing carbon. There are traces of volcanic eruptions, sulfur, and ash that altered climates. There are hints of ocean changes as plankton bloomed or died, shifting oxygen balances. Even dust rides the winds, sealed into the bubbles, telling of deserts growing and shrinking. To study the air is to read a diary of Earth written in whispers. Now imagine yourself shrinking down, becoming small enough to step inside one of those bubbles. Around you is the atmosphere of an ancient age. The air feels different, lighter, almost fragile. You listen closely. It tells of colder winds, of skies where the stars gleamed sharper, of nights where fires flickered on tundra grasses. You realize you are not just reading history, you are breathing it. Each bubble is alive with memory. Breathe slowly again. Notice how calming it feels to think of air not as empty, but as a story. Every breath you take is part of a great cycle, joined 2 breaths from the past. You may be inhaling molecules once drawn in by a dinosaur, once exhaled by a tree long gone, once carried in a glacier. The archaeology of air is not only in ice, it is in you, circulating endlessly. The bubbles also remind us of silence, for there are gaps, moments where no great change is recorded, when the air was steady and life went on quietly. These silences are as important as the spikes. They tell us that not every age is turbulent, that some are calm, sustained, long. Air, like memory, is not all noise. It is also rest. As this chapter softens toward its close, you realize that the archaeology of air is a meditation on impermanence. Gases shift, fires burn, forests breathe, and yet, within ice, the breath of ages is kept. You feel grateful for this quiet archive, for the way it holds space for stories no one told, for ages no one witnessed. And then you ask yourself, if even air can hold memory, what about light? Does starlight, crossing millions of years, carry with it echoes of events long gone? Could light itself be an archive, waiting for us to learn its language? The thought lingers, unresolved, like a breath held at the edge of silence. Close your eyes and imagine sitting at the edge of a great library. For many chapters you have walked its halls, ocean, stone, sky, and myth. You have held the bubbles of ancient air, the sediments of the sea, the stories of fire and flood. You have touched fragments of memory and glimpsed echoes of lives long gone. And now, as you sit here, you realize something quietly profound. The shelves are incomplete. Whole wings of this library are missing. The earth remembers, yes, but it also forgets. The crust recycles, oceans bury, ice melts, mountains crumble, fires consume. Even myths, passed through generations, blur and shift until the original events are unrecognizable. Again and again, records. What survives is partial, scattered, stitched together by patience and imagination. And so the deeper you search, the more you encounter silence. This silence is not absence. That is the first lesson. When you stand in front of an empty shelf, it does not mean no book was ever written. It may mean the book was lost, burned, or never copied forward. The same is true of Earth. The missing evidence of civilizations, of floods, of forgotten ages may not mean they never existed. It may only mean that time erased them. Silence is not a verdict. It is an unanswered question. Let your breath mirror this truth. Inhale and feel the fullness of what is known. Exhale and release into the mystery of what is not. Both are necessary. Both shape the rhythm of understanding. To know only certainty is to hold your breath. To exhale into uncertainty is to allow life to flow. Consider how much has already been lost. The oldest seafloor is younger than the age of mammals. The vast forests that once covered continents are gone, their pollen sealed in sediments, but their trunks and branches vanished. Species lived and vanished without fossil traces. Even whole climates, warm or cold, are known only by Hind's ratios of oxygen, bands in ice, colors of sediment. The record is fragmented and always will be. And so the humility of science is not to claim final answers, but to work within these limits. Scientists piece together stories as carefully as archaeologists reconstruct broken pots from shards. The pots are never whole. Some fragments will never be found. But the act of assembling, of imagining, is valuable in itself. Knowledge is not a fortress of certainty. It is a mosaic of glimpses. Now imagine yourself holding a fossil. It is the impression of a fern leaf, delicate and perfect, pressed into stone. You marvel at its detail, the veins of the leaf, the curve of the stem, but you also notice the missing parts. The fern's color is gone. Its roots are gone. The soil it grew in, the insects that landed on it, the air it breathed are gone. The fossil is a memory, not the whole. Yet even this fragment moves you. Even this partial record is enough to remind you of the life that once was. In this way, you learn to rest in not knowing. The gaps are not failures. They are invitations. They ask you to imagine, to wonder, to dream. Where certainty ends, curiosity begins. You breathe again, slow and steady. With each exhale, you let go of the demand for answers. With each inhale, you welcome the quiet mystery. You realize that to live in the limits of knowing is not to live in despair. It is to live in openness. It is to accept that some truths are beyond reach, and that beauty lies in the reaching itself. Silence, too, has its lessons. When the earth forgets, it reminds us that permanence is an illusion. Civilizations vanish, landscapes shift, stories fade. To cling too tightly to certainty is to forget that life itself is transient. But to accept impermanence is to find peace. Like waves erasing footprints in sand, forgetting is part of the rhythm of being. And so you let yourself imagine all the vanished things, civilizations before humans, oceans now gone, forests long turned to coal. You cannot see them, cannot prove them, cannot know them, but you can wonder. And sometimes wonder is enough. Wonder is a kind of knowledge that does not require evidence. It is a recognition of possibility, a reverence for mystery. Now let yourself rest in a simple image, a horizon at dusk. The sky is painted in fading colors, and beyond it lies the night. You cannot see what is beyond the horizon, but you know it is there. You do not need to prove the existence of stars to feel their presence. In the same way, you do not need certainty of forgotten ages to feel their possibility. Mystery is its own kind of light. As you linger in this moment, notice the shift in yourself. The weight of needing answers lifts. In its place is a calm spaciousness. The limits of knowing are not boundaries, but openings. They remind you that life is not a puzzle to be solved completely. It is a journey of glimpses, echoes, fragments, each enough to awaken awe. Perhaps Earth erases too well. Perhaps the silence we encounter is not the silence of absence, but of forgetting. And perhaps we will never know for certain what came before us, or what may come after. But in this humility lies a gentler wisdom, that life does not need permanence to be meaningful. A song does not need to last forever to be beautiful. A breath does not need to be permanent to give life. Take one more slow breath. Feel it enter, fill, and leave. That breath, too, will vanish, forgotten by the world. Yet for this moment, it is everything. Knowledge is like that. Temporary, fleeting, partial, and yet entirely enough. And as this chapter closes, you feel the whisper of the next question rising in you. If forgetting is part of Earth, part of time, and part of us, then what is it that endures? What remains when even memory is gone? The question lingers, soft and unresolved, inviting you forward. Close your eyes and let yourself drift far ahead in time. The world you know has passed. Cities crumble. Forests reclaim their edges. Rivers carve new paths. Generations fade. And eventually, humanity itself is gone. What then remains of us? If Earth is both recorder and eraser, what pages of our story will survive? What will be our own trace? Imagine the ground beneath your feet as a palimpsestraton unerased, written again. Somewhere in its layers, our chapter will be pressed. not in monuments or books, not in the words we leave each other, but in chemistry, in material, in the faint seams of stone. Plastics, for one, light, durable, strange in their resilience. They drift in oceans, scatter across fields, settle into riverbed. Over centuries, they fragment into smaller and smaller pieces, but they do not vanish. They fall with dust, sink with sediment, and are buried. Someday, a geologist millions of years hence might find a band in the rock, a thin dark line filled with polymers never made by nature, a line that whispers, quietly but unmistakably, that something artificial once lived here. Metals, too. We have smelted iron, forged steel, refined aluminum. We have scattered alloys across the earth in ships, machines, skyscrapers, satellites that fall eventually back to the ground. Many will corrode, returning to oxides, blending again with soil and sea, but traces will linger, concentrations of nickel and chromium, seams of refined copper, residues that reveal smelting fires. To future eyes, it may appear as if the earth herself passed briefly through a fever of metallurgy. Then there are the chemical scars. Our burning of fossil fuels leaves carbon spikes in ice and sediment, distinct from the gentle rhythms of ages before. Radioisotopes from nuclear tests drifted across the world, settling in rain, in soil, in bone. These isotopes, rare and unnatural, will remain detectable for hundreds of thousands of years. They will mark a boundary in the strata, a horizon of chemistry that says, here, something unusual happened. Here, a species burned too brightly. Pause. Here. Let yourself picture that boundary in stone. Imagine cliffs rising from a coastline in the far future. Layers of sediment show ancient seas, ancient forests, ancient deserts, and then one narrow band, darker, sharper, full of odd chemistry and plastic fragments. To any who might study it, this band would be unmistakable. It would be us. Not our art, not our laughter, not our loves, but our residue. Our trace would not be who we were, but simply that we were. This thought might feel heavy, but as you breathe, notice how it softens. There is humility here, and humility can be calming. We, like all who came before, will fade, but in fading, we join the rhythm of the earth, becoming one more layer, one more seam in stone. Our brief spark will not be forgotten entirely. It will be folded into the memory of the planet, written not in words, but in matter. Think of fossils. Once, creatures swam through oceans and flew through skies. Now they are bones pressed into rock, shells turned to mineral. They do not tell us of behavior, of song, of color, yet they tell us that life was. In the same way, our trace may not reveal our music or our poetry, but it will show that we lived, that we changed the planet, that we burned brightly enough to leave a mark. Breathe again, slowly. Imagine yourself as part of this future fossil. Your body, your breath, your choices, tiny contributions to that global seam. Each exhale joins the carbon cycle. Each action, however small, adds to the layer. You are part of the trace already, inscribed in the atmosphere, in the chemistry of rain, in the dust settling on the seafloor. We are all writing together the line that will become our memory. There is a strange comfort in knowing that our monuments will not endure. The tallest buildings will fall. The greatest cities will erode. Languages will vanish, myths will blur. What will remain are quieter things, chemistry, plastics, isotopes, altered stone, a subtle trace, and maybe that is enough. For the Earth does not need to preserve us in detail. It needs only to remember, faintly, that we passed by. Now picture a mountain in that far future. Its cliffs shine with sunlight. A hiker, not human, but of some other kind, pauses to study the stone. They see the thin band, the plastic fragments turned to fossil, the chemical spike. They touch it with curiosity. They wonder, perhaps, about the beings who left this scene. They do not know us, cannot imagine our stories. But they know that something lived, something powerful enough to leave a scar. That, perhaps, is our final gift to the record. The thought brings both humility and peace, for it reminds you that nothing is permanent and nothing is truly lost. We are not eternal, but we are part of eternity's layers. Our trace will join the Earth's memory, faint but enduring, a whisper pressed into stone. As this chapter closes, you feel the question rise again, soft and unresolved. If our trace is only matter, only chemistry, then where do the less tangible things go? Our music, our dreams, our love. Do they leave traces too? Not in stone, but in something wider, something yet unseen. The thought lingers like a breath in still air, carrying you toward the next wonder. Close your eyes. Let all the stories of ice, ocean, stone, myth, and stars drift into quiet. You have walked a long path, tracing the fragments of memory the earth and sky allow us to hold. You have touched bubbles of ancient air, sediments at the bottom of seas, the scars of tectonic forgetting, and the silence of other planets. You have listened to myths that carry echoes, and to questions about civilizations before humans. Now you stand in stillness, here at the end. All the fragments gather into one simple thing, the gentle question. It is a question older than any book, older than any telescope, older even than the first firelit story. Could we be the first? Or are we only the latest in a long succession of beings who have wondered the same? The question does not demand an answer. It is enough that it is asked. You take a slow breath. Inhale possibility. Exhale humility. You let yourself rest in the rhythm of not knowing. The Earth's record is partial. The cosmos is vast, and the silence is deep. Yet that silence has a texture. It is not empty. It is alive with patience. Consider this. For billions of years, life has ebbed and flowed across Earth. The trilobites ruled, and they are gone. The dinosaurs reigned for 160 million years, and they too are gone. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and in time all will vanish. If others came before, their records may be erased. If others exist now, they may be too far to reach us. We stand not at the center of history, but at the edge of uncertainty, and that edge is soft, like the horizon at twilight. Perhaps we are the first life's first true experiment in consciousness and industry. If so, then the responsibility is immense. To be first is to be fragile, to carry the flame carefully, to keep it alive long enough to pass forward. Or perhaps we are not first. Perhaps we are only the latest. If so, then the responsibility is gentler, to savor the moment, to know we are part of a larger rhythm, a cycle of blooming and fading, of remembering and forgetting. Either way, the lesson is the same: humility. Now imagine yourself looking at the night sky. The stars are countless, spread across blackness like lanterns on an infinite river. Somewhere among them may be other beings asking the same gentle question. Somewhere, light years away, someone may be wondering whether they are the first or the latest. You will never know their answer. They will never know yours. But in the act of wondering, you are connected. Wonder itself is a bridge, a thread that joins all who gaze into mystery. Breathe slowly. Let that connection soften you. You do not need proof to feel kinship. You do not need evidence to feel awe. The act of asking is enough. Asking is participation in the universe. To question is to belong. The universe does not hurry to answer. Stars live for billions of years. Galaxies take eons to turn. Planets form, lose atmospheres, gain oceans, lose them again, all without rush. In comparison, human time is but a blink. To expect a quick reply from the cosmos is like whispering to a mountain and waiting for an echo in seconds. The mountain will answer, but on its own timescale, through rivers carving valleys, glaciers sculpting peaks, forests rising and falling. The universe will answer too, in its own slow rhythm, perhaps with discovery, perhaps with silence. Both are replies. You let your mind drift into this patience. You imagine silence not as emptiness, but as a deep listening. The universe is listening. The stars are listening. The earth itself is listening. Our task is not to fill that silence with certainty, but to rest within it, to feel its embrace. Now imagine yourself as part of a much longer story. You are not only an individual, not only part of humanity, but part of life itself. Threads stretching back through every ancestor, every adaptation, every leap of survival. And you are also part of whatever may come after. Whether there will be others humans or not to wonder in your place is unknown. But the question will remain, carried forward as long as curiosity exists. What does it mean to live within the limits of knowing? It means to accept that the mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a companion to walk beside. The gentle question is not a riddle with an answer. It is a song with no end. Its beauty lies not in resolution, but in resonance. Picture yourself walking along a quiet shore at dusk. The tide moves in and out. The horizon glows faintly. You feel small, but not diminished. You feel humbled, but not afraid. Above you, the first stars appear, and you wonder, could we be the first? Could we be the latest? The waves do not answer. The stars do not answer. And yet, in their silence, you feel an answer already present. The answer is that wonder is enough. Take another slow breath. The question softens in you. You do not need to hold it tightly. It can rest gently, like a pebble in your palm. Its weight is light, its texture smooth. It does not press for conclusion. It simply asks to be noticed, to be carried. The gentle question has guided philosophers, scientists, storytellers, dreamers. It has inspired telescopes and myths, equations and prayers. It is the quiet heartbeat behind exploration. And even if no proof ever arrives, the question itself is a gift. It makes us look outward, upward, inward. It makes us humble, and humility is a form of peace. As the chapter draws towards stillness, you sense that you are not closing, but circling. The gentle question does not end. It loops, always open, always returning. Could we be the first? Could we be the latest? The universe does not hurry. The earth does not insist. The silence holds you, and you rest within it. One final breath. You let the inhale fill you with wonder, and the exhale release the need for certainty. You are here, now, part of a story far larger than yourself. That is enough. And as you drift toward sleep, the last thought lingers softly. Sometimes the truest knowledge is not proof, but the willingness to wonder. The universe does not hurry to answer, and perhaps in that slowness lies the answer itself.